안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕코입니다. 오늘 운동하기 전에 제가 얼마 전에 식물 죽었다고 그랬잖아요. 여기 보시면 여기는 아주 쌩쌩하고 활기찬 그런 아이가 지금 자라고 있고, 살짝 돌려버리면은 이거 봐요. 상황이 매우 안 좋습니다. 상황이 매우 안 좋아요. 그래서 제가 물어봤죠. 도대체 어떻게 해야 되냐고. 그래서 전문가들에게 물어봤습니다. 나름 전문가들에게. 그리고 전문가들이 말해주기를, 일단은 죽은 부위를 잘라내래요. 여기 보시면은 보이죠? 이 색깔이 갈색으로 다 변했잖아요. 이쪽에 얘네들은 색이 괜찮은데, 그래서 잘라내려고 합니다. 제가 한 3일인가 4일 전에 얘기를 했죠. 이거 얘가 죽어간다고. 그래서 햇빛에다가 막 놔두고 막 그랬는데, 안 돼. 이거는 원래 햇빛에 두는 게 아니래요. 그늘에다 두는 거래요. 물도 많이 주면 안 되고. 그래서 일단은 가지치기를 하도록 하겠습니다. 네, 약간 불안하네, 무섭네. 잡아당기지 말고 가위로 자르라고 하더라고요. 이거 지금 잘라서 이걸로 얘가 살 수 있을까요? 이 보면은 이 끝부분 여기 이거 보여요, 이거? 요 아이는 되게 쌩쌩해요, 끝부분은. 왠지 이거 잘라주면은 살아날 수 있을 것 같아. 만약에 이거 잘랐는데 얘가 그래도 살아나지 못한다, 그러면은 이 끝부분을 자른 다음에 줄기를 잘라서 줄기 부분을 다시 심을 거예요. 그럼 뿌리를 내릴 수도 있다고 하더라고요. 이 아이가 지금 잎사귀가 다 잘려 나가고 있습니다. 이것이 바로 탈모를 겪는 탈모인들의 슬픔이지 않을까요? 어디까지 잘라야 되지? 얘 밑에 보면은 밑부분에 큰 잎사귀들이 있는데, 이 큰 잎사귀들은 얘도 상태가 안 좋은데? 여러분, 지금 엄청 많이 잘랐어요. 지금 엄청 많이 잘랐죠? 이것도 잘라야겠죠? 요거 지금 색이 갈색이니까. 오, 이 밑부분에 있는 얘네들도 잘라야 되나? 어떻게 해야 되지? 이거 어떻게 해야 되지? 지금 제가 자른 거를 보여드릴게요. 지금 이만큼 잘랐어요. 이만큼 잘랐습니다. 이만큼. 엄청 많이 잘랐죠? 이게 다 갈색, 이게 다 죽어가고 있는 그런 아이였습니다. 이 밑에도 큰 애도 잘라야 되는지 모르겠네. 이 지금 큰 잎사귀가 4개가 남았거든요. 여기 보이시죠? 4개. 큰 잎사귀가 4개가 남아있어요. 이 4개 중에 혹시 떨어뜨릴 것 같아. 무서워. 자, 큰 잎사귀가 4개가 남아있습니다. 이 4개 중에 제일 색이 갈색으로 변한 거 요거 하나만 자를게요. 그 다음에 나머지는 일단은 그대로 두겠습니다. 그래도 가장 희망적인 게 이 끝에 보면은 이 끝에 지금 이 아이들, 얘네는 아직 살아있어요. 이것도 갈색으로 변하네, 줄기가. 아닌가? 얘는 아직 변하는 게 아닌 것 같긴데. 아직 괜찮아요. 좋아요. 됐어. 이렇게 자르니까는 깔끔하네. 깔끔해졌습니다. 아주 깔끔해졌어요. 만약에 이 나머지, 얘도 죽어가는데, 지금 잎사귀가. 일단 물은 한 열흘에 한 번, 여름에는 3일에서 4일, 겨울이 더 길었던 것 같은데, 일단은 이 정도만 하고 운동하겠습니다. 과연 이 식물이 살아날 수 있을지. 아이고. 여기다 두고 다시 운동을 하러 가겠습니다. 오늘은 어저께 스쿼트 210개 했어요. 210개. 그 다음에 턱걸이를 계속했죠. 오늘은 팔굽혀펴기랑 복근 운동을 할 겁니다. 내일 쉬는 날이에요. 그래서 오늘 최대한 하려고 했는데 오늘도 진짜 너무 힘들어서 일하는데 건물을 계속 왔다 갔다 하고 땀 흘리면서 그 일을 많이 해가지고 진이 빠집니다. 진이 빠져. 그래서 일단 최대한 하겠습니다. 아마 팔굽혀펴기 20개, 윗몸 일으키기를 4세트, 5세트까지는 안 쉬고 했던 것 같아요. 한번 하겠습니다. 역시 운동할 땐 CNN이죠.
That he makes in public. This poll seems to relate especially to this issue of public trust in these world leaders, and it is very difficult, of course, to have that trust in somebody when you know that they lie on a pretty frequent basis, as this president, of course, we know so frequently does.
Jeremy Diamond is at the White House. Thank you, sir. We'll speak to you as the next couple of hours move on. This signing ceremony just less than 2 hours from now. Encouraged but not mandatory. That is the White House mask policy for today's event. The US government says it is taking all necessary precautions to keep the coronavirus in check. There, Israeli officials worry a gathering with only a smattering of masked attendees will send absolutely the wrong message back home. The country currently preparing to go under its second coronavirus lockdown after a spike in cases. Now, Aaron Liebman has been covering this historic story like no other. He was even on the first direct commercial flight from Israel to the UAE with Jared Kushner just over 2 weeks ago. Aaron joining us now from Jerusalem. And the optics on this, sir, are important for Netanyahu. He's got to get them right, hasn't he?
He does. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is making a big deal out of this, and it certainly is an historic day and an historic accomplishment for normalization agreements with the UAE and Bahrain. But it doesn't change what's happening here domestically. Coronavirus numbers are essentially out of control. Nearly 5,000 cases yesterday. That's a new record. Wide-scale protests against Netanyahu, the fact that he's facing corruption trial, an upcoming corruption trial. Meanwhile, the economy is at nearly 20% unemployment, according to the unemployment service here, and there are serious problems here, as that general lockdown attests to, which is just a few days away right after Netanyahu returns from Washington. So the optics here will certainly distract from that, and again, it is a major accomplishment for Netanyahu, but it seems at this point, especially with the mass controversy over the ceremony at the White House, this will be him battling the domestic headlines versus him celebrating the foreign policy headlines in Washington. Becky.
Oren, Bahrain, the first, let's call it, domino to fall after the announcement that the UAE was going to normalise relations with Israel. Donald Trump spoke on Fox and Friends this morning in the lead-up to this ceremony at midday in Washington. Have a listen to some of what he said.
Everyone said this couldn't happen, and we made a deal with UAE, led by a man, Mohammed, who's a great leader, a great warrior. And we made a deal with UAE, then Bahrain came in, and we have many others going to be coming in over a short period of time.
So who are we expecting to follow suit, and how soon?
The most likely candidate, it appears at this point, would be Oman. They put out a statement that was very positive about the Israel-Bahrain agreement, and it seems to suggest that they might be next. Let's not forget Oman hosted Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu last year. Are there other candidates? Of course. Morocco might be on the list, although that's a little more difficult to see at this point. Morocco has had strained relations with Israel and with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the past, but they are looking for something from the White House, recognition of their occupation, their sovereignty in Western Sahara. So there is sort of a carrot that the White House can dangle there. Who else might be on that list? Sudan. Sudan is looking for something from the White House as well, to be removed from the state sponsor of terror list. And of course, the big prize, which would be a monumental shift in the region, would be Saudi Arabia. That seems unlikely at this point, although I think you can look at the region and say it's moving in that direction. Oman would probably be the likeliest next candidate. Who knows if that's weeks away, days away, months away, or years away at this point? Probably not years. Sooner than that, I'd imagine.
Donald Trump also spoke about the controversial sale of the F-35 fighter jets to the UAE. This is something, of course, that the UAE has said that they hope will be facilitated by the US now that this normalization of relations with Israel is coming about. Have a listen.
Well, they're very wealthy countries for the most part. I mean, some are extraordinarily like UAE, and they would like to buy some fighter jets, and I personally would have no problem with it.
That's a big deal, of course, because of three letters, QME. Just help us understand.
So the U.S., by law, is required to maintain Israel's QME, its qualitative military edge. Israel is supposed to have the hardware, the military hardware, that is, and the ability to defend itself and to act for its own defense. And U.S. obligation there is to make sure that Israel retains an edge over other states in the region. If the UAE gets the F-35, which is the latest fighter jet in the American inventory, then it's a question of, does Israel lose its QME? If two nations here have the same military hardware, the same advanced military hardware, does it degrade in any way Israel's qualitative military edge? A big question from the very beginning, and it's a question that remains, did Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu essentially sign off on the sale of F-35 to the UAE? He has stringently denied doing so, and other ministers in this government have said they would work to make sure Congress does not allow the sale to go through. But let's be clear about one point. If Netanyahu really wanted to stop this, he could go to Congress right now. He's in Washington. He can meet with congressional leaders on both sides of the aisle and say, don't approve the sale of F-35s to the UAE. He's not going to do that by all of our expectations. And because of that, there is a tacit understanding here that he acknowledges, and he's sort of come to accept the fact that the UAE is probably going to get F-35s from the Trump administration. The fact that Trump was so sort of boastful and casual about selling F-35s to the UAE, that's a different question.
Aaron Liebman is in Jerusalem for you. Thank you, sir. Busy day for all of us. Well, while the official signing is happening today, the United Arab Emirates and Israel have already raced ahead with new deals, from the coronavirus to technology. I spoke to one of the key UAE power brokers for this agreement. And I asked the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs for his response to those critics who view this deal in what is a US presidential election year through the prism of Donald Trump and what he is flogging as a foreign policy win. Have a listen to what he told me.
I think the most important thing why this peace agreement was juxtaposed very close in this period to the American election was really the opportunity to suspend annexation. I mean,
which has been applauded by the Democrats as much as it has by the Republicans.
Exactly. So really, if one is asking the question, why now? I think the key really is in the issue of annexation. I mean, everybody was appalled by the decision of the Israeli government and part of their electoral pledge, really, to annex Palestinian lands, and that was, a sword really, sort of hanging over a two-state solution. And we could have signed this next year, we could have signed it the year after, but I think that's really the critical part if you're asking the question, why now?
So why is it that the Palestinians say that it seems clear to them they can no longer count on certain Arab states for support?
I mean, not all our sovereign decisions here have to be completely about the Palestinian issue. We think that we can have the right balance of having normal relations with Israel, but at the same time being, steadfast with regards to our goal towards a two-state solution and an independent Palestinian state, and with East Jerusalem as its capital. So I would say it is really about a fresh approach. Clearly, the old approach of the empty chair, the old approach of no communications, no bridges, in our assessment, has not worked.
So in reality, that means what? What can you offer to the Palestinians in
UAE,
support
이스라엘, 바레인,
a new dialogue,
Normalization?
or a dialogue at least, with the Israelis
saying
and
normalization이
the
뭐지?
possible
Normalization이
retailing of a
뭐예요?
two-state solution?
It's a very good question. I think it's a very good question. I would say number one is we already have a tangible outcome, which is the pledge on suspension of annexation. Again, is this going to be in perpetuity? I doubt it. But at least we have quite a comfortable window.
You're talking about what, 5 years?
I don't know. I really don't know. And I think our ability to influence the Israelis will be more pronounced. I don't see it immediately today or tomorrow, but as you build, I would say, political and economic and investment profile, your weight becomes more important in a bilateral relationship. That's the nature of things.
Turkey has accused the UAE of, I
줄었죠.
quote here,
코로나
betraying the
이전과
Palestinian
이후 비교해 봤을
cause
때.
for its own
거기다가
interests. The
전기차에
Turkish foreign
대한
minister saying, and I quote him here, it is a country
이슈도
that
계속
puts pressure
커지고
on
있고요.
some Arab countries
물론
regarding Palestine.
자동차에서만 쓰이는
Well, again, Turkey's position
전부는 아니지만
is really not about Palestine. Turkey's
비행기에
position is
쓰이는
about
것도 일단
polarized
전
region,
세계적으로 뭐
where Turkey has
엄청 불었고요.
tried to
10%가
play
10%도
an
안 될 것
outsized
같은데.
role within the Arab context.
You have accused them of neo-Ottoman expansionism.
True, and I think this is also part and parcel
그거에
of Turkey's
관련된 뭐
image
어쩌고
with
하는
itself.
것
Dr.
같은데.
Gargash, there does remain significant bipartisan opposition to selling F-35s to the UAE due to concerns that that would degrade Israel's technological and tactical military advantage in the region. While this deal, the normalization deal in and of itself, has bipartisan support, that element does not, as we understand it.
The debate will always be there. I mean, I was reading comments, I think day before yesterday, by a former Israeli prime minister arguing that
Okay, John,
these
forget.
F-35s should be sold to the
10개
and that was
나가고
ridiculous in any way
유목의 기계가 있습니다.
that the F-35s undermine Israel's security or but make actually an American ally perhaps more secure.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has said, and I quote, we have a 20-year plus security relationship with the UAE. We've provided them with technical assistance and with military assistance. We will now continue to review that process. We are deeply committed to ensure that the UAE has, and I paraphrase him here, the equipment they need to secure and defend their own people from the same threat that we face, that of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Is that what this is all about?
We do have our issues with Iran, and many of these issues are substantial issues. But I think we see that these issues need to be resolved through de-escalation and through diplomacy. This is not, an agreement about Iran. This is an agreement, firstly, about the UAE, about its UAE's role and position in the world, and it's secondly about the Arab-Israeli theater and what can be done there and what messages to send. This is not about Iran.
Dr. Anwar Gargash speaking to me earlier, and we will continue to monitor events at the White House ahead of what is this historic signing today. Picture this, the world's most famous thorn in Vladimir Putin's side is posting again on social media after being poisoned. We are live in Berlin for the latest on that story. Plus,
you give a climate arsonist 4 more years in the White House, why would anyone be surprised if we have more America ablaze?
Joe Biden warning Americans what will happen if the country sees 4 more years of Donald Trump. How the president is once again dismissing the science of climate change. That coming up.
We've missed the globe-trotting uncovering the city's DNA.
It's my turn.
Meeting people who will share its secrets.
No. Wasn't that bad?
And making discoveries that wow.
Look at that.
It's a world of wonder. Now, go and see it. Sunday on CNN, in association with Turkish Airlines.
To open doors, to develop contacts, and to unlock secrets, it takes trust.
It was the first time he really came out of his shell in front of the camera.
Trust that you'll listen.
So great that you're here today. It just highlights what's making a difference.
That you'll be honest. I don't want to pry, but what sort of conversations do you have with them? Trust that you'll be accurate and you'll be fair. It was an unprecedented move, very eerie. All the roads have been closed off. Describe the scene that you arrived to. The Apache attack helicopter. This is what Captain Wales has been flying. What do you do with Crimea?
This is Europe's problem.
Do you want talks with them?
What is the point of talking now?
We continue to monitor the government in crisis. This was the Duchess's first news interview. Rare access indeed. That's what it's all about. Max Foster, CNN.
Is getting a look at a new photo, and it is an image that is speaking volumes. This is the first post-attack picture from Alexei Navalny. Now, German doctors say that the Russian opposition leader was poisoned with the nerve agent Novichok last month. The Russian government says it wasn't them. The Navalny aide says the anti-corruption campaigner plans to return home once he has recovered. Let's get the very latest for you. Fred Plotkin is in Berlin. And Fred, awake and now wanting to return to Russia, what more do we know about Alexei Navalny's condition at this point?
Hi there, Becky. I think that this photo already is quite remarkable that it was posted today. It obviously shows Alexei Navalny on that hospital bed at the Charité Hospital, one of the most renowned hospitals here in Germany, together with his wife and certainly what appears to be his 2 children. They're obviously wearing masks, but that's certainly who appears to be in that photo. The family obviously overjoyed to see Alexei Navalny awake once again. This comes right after the German hospital, the Charité, has said that his condition is improving, that he is now able to get up at times, and that he is also being mobilized as well. And I think one of the most important things that they announced late last night was that he is now able to breathe on his own without any sort of help or without any sort of ventilator. And that's also what this post is about as well. I want to read you what Alexei Navalny said in that post. He wrote, "Hi," this is a quote, "Hi, this is Navalny. I miss you. I can still hardly do anything, but yesterday I was able to breathe on my own for the whole day, just myself. I did not use any outside help, not even the simplest valve in my throat. I liked it very much. An amazing and underestimated process by many. Recommended, or I highly recommend it." And obviously Alexei Navalny very happy to be able to breathe on his own again. And obviously, Becky, that also feeds into what we've been hearing from German doctors as well, who keep saying that his condition is improving, but they do say it is going to be a very long road to recovery for Alexei Navalny, and they still say it's not sure whether or not he's able to make a full recovery at all, Becky.
From the Russian perspective, we've heard from the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, who has said today that he didn't understand why Russia has not been given the same access that France or French and Swedish specialists were given to test Navalny's medical samples. Do we have any response from Russia as to Navalny's desire to go back at this point?
Yeah, and it's also from Dmitry Peskov, who was on a call a little earlier today, where he, once again, as you said, he said that they also wanted access to some of the lab results that the Germans have gotten, the Swedes have now gotten, the French have now gotten as well. And by the way, the Germans also saying that they are giving samples from Navalny to the OPCW, to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. We're able to take samples themselves to get their own readouts about what exactly Alexei Navalny was poisoned with. And one of the things that Dmitry Peskov said is, as is is custom by the Russian government, didn't even use Alexei Navalny's name, but he did say, of course, for any Russian citizen, it is possible to return